Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy.
Hey friends, welcome to Crime Will Tell. I'm Jamie.
I'm Carrie. No, you do that every time.
Every time, like I haven't seen you in years, but I'm always excited to see you.
When in fact, we see each other all the fucking time.
Not as much as I would like.
Aw, making my heart go pitter patter.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be kind.
Oh, fuck off. Anyway, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing
Good,
really
good,
good. I've
good.
got my drink. Long
What
day
you
of
drinking?
travel. I actually I'm not drinking bourbon today.
Well, what the fuck
I'm
are
drinking
you
whiskey.
drinking?
I'm drinking whiskey, and I say that like I actually know the fucking difference between bourbon and whiskey. I don't. Apparently,
That's
there's a
okay.
difference, but I think it's subtle, or maybe not. I don't know. But I'm drinking Jameson Black Barrel whiskey. Mm-hmm. What are you drinking?
Some Knob Creek.
Knob?
Yeah, my Knob Creek is tasty and I'm enjoying it. So,
All right. Well, cheers, friend.
cheers to you. Clink. So, before we get into this week's case, I wanted to give a shout out slash read a really cool comment that we got on YouTube. You down for that?
Okay, yeah, totally.
If you remember episode 28, that was the Ernie Christie Sandy Turpin case, we got this really cool comment on that video on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
And so this is from at Olivia K6417. So I don't know if her name's Olivia, I would guess, but this is what she had to say.
Okay.
So she said, "Hello, loved listening to this. My mother is Tess, the friend spoken about in this story." So Tess was Sandy Turpin's friend.
Yeah, the one that
That
eventually went to the police.
Yeah, and so she said, "Over the course of my adolescence, I remember watching my mom occasionally break down crying over the loss of her best friend, Sandy. You are absolutely right noting the hesitance of going to the police about literally anything in Humboldt County." This was Humboldt County, California. She said, "It's part of the culture there to this day. My dad, Goliath, had urged my mom to go to the police for years about Sandy, and one day she broke down and did it. She's so glad that she could finally bring closure to her friends and family. Regarding why it took 2 weeks for Sandy's mom to go to the police, she didn't want to get Sandy in trouble with law enforcement. So she tried finding her whereabouts through her friends and associates. The police were a last ditch effort for her. Such a tragic story. Thank you for covering it."
Oh, that's great.
Thank you for reaching out with your kind words and the additional info and insight into the case. We
Yeah.
really appreciate that. So I just wanted to share that with everybody because we kind of had some questions about why people weren't coming forward to try and help find her. And that just answers those questions. It makes total
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
wanted to pass that along. And if you haven't listened to that episode, again, it's episode 28. Check it out.
Yeah. That's cool.
Sip, sip, sip. Mm-mm-mm.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So this is episode 32, and this is the case of the Liske family murders, which is sometimes also referred to as the Halloween murders because it happened on Thanksgiving. So,
Wait, the Halloween murders because it happened. You said that with a fucking straight face and straight tone, and I was like,
know.
wait a minute. What?
It's the only straight thing I can do. Okay, so this case took place in 2010 in Oak Harbor, Ohio, which is a small town, really, I mean, very small town. It only has about 1,000 residents.
Hmm.
And Oak Harbor is in the northern portion of Ohio near Lake Erie. So I imagine it's a very beautiful area. This was a super just tight knit community. Everybody knows everybody, quiet and safe, yada, yada, yada. So Bill and Susan Liske were two of the well known and well liked residents of this small town. They were a really loving couple that just enjoyed being outdoors. They loved spending time together hunting, gardening, fishing, anything outside. And they ended up getting married in 2001. Bill had a son named William Liske who went by BJ. I don't know why people do this.
Poor kid.
Don't call your kid fucking BJ.
Beej.
So Bill Liske had, I'm assuming William Jr., BJ, and then Susan had two sons, Derek and Devin Griffin,
And
from
these were
her
from
previous
previous
marriage.
marriages.
Yeah.
Okay.
So after getting married, Susan and her two sons moved into the house where Bill and BJ lived. This house was on a very large, secluded property that was like almost 100 acres. So this was a
Mm.
huge property. They really tried their best at blending their families, which isn't always a very easy transition, especially when you have like three teenage sons or two teenage sons and then one younger one. Like there's a lot happening.
I was going to ask how old the kiddos were when they blended. If they were like heading into puberty or through puberty or in the middle of puberty, that's a rough time to blend.
Yeah, so BJ I think was like 15
Yeah,
when they
that's
got
tough.
married. Derek would have been like 14 maybe, and then Devin would have been quite a bit younger, like maybe 8
Mm,
at the
okay.
time, but still just kind of difficult ages for
Yeah,
a big transition.
yeah.
So Susan's sons, again, Derek and Devin, adjusted really well to moving in with into Bill's home and got along great with their stepdad Bill. Derek was a track star in high school and was a second degree black belt in Taekwondo.
Hmm.
Devin was really active in the church. He sang in the choir. He was a diver on the swim team. Both were known to just be incredibly kind and were really well liked by other students, other kids, and just other people in the community. However, BJ Liske, who again was 15 when Bill and Susan got married, was not a fan of this new living situation because he was used to only living with his dad. Bless you. My God.
I was I was trying so hard to like will it away and it said nah bitch.
I
Sorry. I'm so sorry. You were on a good flow. I totally fucked it up. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna take a
I
drink.
saw the pre-sneeze face. I was like, God damn it. What is happening?
Mm.
That was fantastic. So, so BJ was used to just living with his dad. They're just a couple bros hanging out, and Bill worked long hours. So BJ a lot of times had just the house to himself, which as
Mm.
a teenager had to have been
Heaven.
soups awesome. And so now he's living with a stepmom who had rules
Mm.
and liked having some structure in her household, god forbid. And she wasn't over the top with rules. Let's like I just want to be clear about this. She just had expectations, like doing your homework and completing chores, being home before curfew, not being a mouthy dumb asshole, like just basic normal shit that you expect of your children. But BJ didn't have the freedom that he did when he was just
Yeah.
living with his dad. So this new structure led to a very tumultuous relationship between Susan, his stepmother, and BJ, which sometimes ended in violence, which I will touch more on later.
Okay.
So unfortunately, BJ's mental health was deteriorating as he got older.
Mm.
He was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder,
Whoa,
which
what's that?
is it's kind of a combination of symptoms between of schizophrenia and then either depression or bipolar disorder. So, like bipolar cycles, periods of like intense symptoms are usually followed by improvements. in mood and
Oh.
behavior. So you kind of have these like swings in mood and behaviors. You can be very manic. Sometimes can include hallucinations, delusions, manic periods with high energy, and then periods of depression. So you're just like pretty much if it's not treated, a person's behavior can just be all over the goddamn place. Because I don't know, it didn't exactly say what his like specific symptoms were.
Okay.
It did say that he was known to just kind of be socially awkward in general, but when he drank alcohol, his behavior would
Ooh,
become
yeah.
incredibly violent and combative.
Yeah.
So if Bill wasn't home to diffuse situations, Susan sometimes had to call their neighbor Mark on numerous occasions because he seemed to be kind of a calming source for BJ, and he could pop over if needed and de-escalate some situations. So things were just really starting to kind of get worse. Like when you're having to call in help to diffuse situations inside your home, it's not great.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did Devin and Dylan try to protect their mom again?
Derek.
Derek
Devin
and
and
Dylan.
Derek.
Did Derek and Dylan try to
No,
protect?
it's Devin and Derek.
Wait, it's Devin and Derek.
Yeah.
So did Dick and Damien try to protect?
Dick
Did
and
Derek and Dylan? No, Derek and Damon. No, wait, who? I'm sorry. I can't. I have no idea which.
Dick
What?
and Damien.
Derek and Dylan.
Devin and Derek.
Devin and Derek. Okay. Did Devin and Derek try to protect their mom when?
I kind of got the impression that a lot of these situations happened when they were the only ones home.
Oh, was BJ pulling the whole sweetest pie in front of his dad and
I think it was just kind of more Bill probably felt pulled between protecting his
mm,
wife
mhm,
and protecting his son.
yeah.
And so I think that when he wasn't around, things kind of got out of control. I don't know if the younger boys were there, but I got the impression that it was maybe more when they were the only two home that things really got out of control because there
Okay.
wasn't Bill there to kind of
Diffuse, yeah, to act as
yeah,
a
be
buffer.
the referee and keep
Yeah,
things from getting out of control.
that had to have been a really tough spot for Bill to be in.
Yeah.
He's got his wife, Susan, who's like, "Why aren't you siding with me as a parental unit?" And then he's got his son BJ going, "I'm your kid. I should come
Right.
first." Yeah.
And we'll get into it a little bit more, but they were like even through all of this Susan was so cool. Like
Really?
she really tried to do right by BJ.
Oh, so she loved him like he was her own,
Yeah,
even
and
though he was a dick.
I don't think that she was like, you need to control your fucking kid. I think it was like, we need to tell him, we
We
need
need
to
to
let him
figure
know
this
how
out. Yeah.
loved he is.
You didn't
And
even laugh at my joke.
what'd you say? I didn't hear you.
I said BJ was being a real dick. And you didn't even laugh at it.
I'm,
You just
I'm,
ignored it.
I'm
You
sorry.
ignored it like I ignore your jokes.
Right? You're just, yeah, you know what you do. Anyway, so
Hmm.
every time.
I do that. I do it.
Okay, so things, like I said, were getting just worse for the family every day. And in
Mm.
2002, Bill ended up having to call police because BJ was threatening to hurt himself. And when police arrived at their house, BJ started attacking the police officers.
Oh my God, that's scary.
And for this, he was given an assault charge through
Oof.
the juvenile court, but nothing ever really came of it. So he was making threats against family members and making threats to hurt himself. And the problems, you know, that had once kind of been contained inside of their house had now trickled out to involve neighbors, like their neighbor Mark that I mentioned, and now law enforcement. So it was
Mm.
like they didn't have the handle on it like they thought that they had previously. And even with this increasing violence, his behavior and his mental health issues were not really being addressed. So in 2004, things really went downhill when BJ, who I believe was like 18 at this time, wrecked a pickup that belonged to one of his stepbrothers, which I'm assuming would have been Derek because he would have been the older one, while he was drinking. So he wrecked this car while intoxicated. So he wrecked the truck, left the scene, went back home, where he and Susan ended up getting into a fight.
Did he have permission to take the truck?
I don't know. It didn't.
Because that would be larceny, grand theft auto,
Right. Yeah,
grand auto.
it didn't say, but during this argument, he ended up punching Susan in the chest,
Oh,
which can be probably fairly innocent, but it can also, if you hit in the heart or something, it
yeah.
can stop your heart. Like, it can be very serious. So this was like,
Well, there's also boobies. That fucking hurts.
yeah, that's true. A titty punch is not
It
cool.
is not fun. No.
So police were called to the house to try and defuse the situation. And Susan did not want to press charges against BJ or have him arrested. But even though she didn't want to take that route, BJ ended up being charged with underage drinking, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. So I guess he probably did take it.
Yeah.
Leaving the scene of a crime, domestic violence, and failure to control. Later that same year, in 2004, he was charged with felonious assault and robbery after he hit Susan in the head with a coffee mug and
Oh.
stole her car keys.
Oh.
However, this round of charges were eventually dropped because BJ was found not competent to stand trial. So, in our
Really?
stellar legal system, yeah, if someone is found incompetent to stand trial, but is not so dangerous that they need to be held in jail, typically the only remaining option is to dismiss the charges, which is so fucked up. So basically, even if a person's behavior is steadily becoming more violent, there isn't much that can be done until someone gets really hurt or killed.
That's We talk about this regularly. That is a loophole in our system, that
Yeah,
in order for the police to have any jurisdictional oversight, I don't know if you know if that's proper terminology, but in order for them to be able to do anything legally, someone has to be
really be
hurt
hurt. Yeah. And
or
so
killed.
getting smashed in the head with a coffee cup
I guess
or
that
a
doesn't count.
mug, it's just not enough. So that's fantastic. God damn it, Bella. I apologize if you can hear my dog in the background.
Yeah.
She gets a little crazy in the evenings.
Witching hour.
Yeah. So after BJ attacked Susan while she was taking a shower, stuff of nightmares.
Wait,
So
she was in the shower,
yeah, and he
naked,
tried to attack
vulnerable.
her. And some reports that I saw said that he was actually trying to rape her. The family had finally had enough. While they had tried to protect him and do what they thought was best for him, they had to worry about the safety of Susan and the three other people living in the house.
Yeah.
So BJ was then forced to move into a group home in Sandusky, Ohio, which was about like 30 miles away from where they lived. And I believe that this was a facility that housed, or like specifically housed, people with like psychological disorders. So it was based around like mental health, which was probably really good for him.
Question. He was
Yes.
over the age of 18 by this point.
Hmm.
So, how were they able to? Do you know how they were able to force him to
I
go into the?
didn't get details. I don't know if it was like court ordered or
Hmm,
what the situation was. I don't know if he
who
just
knows?
wasn't able to
Maybe his
afford
progressive
living on
escalation.
his own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was just like the next best thing. But so he lived in this group home, but as an adult, he was free to kind of come and go as he pleased. I don't think that there were super strict curfews or anything that were enforced like that. So he was allowed to stay at the Liske home on weekends on occasion. And even after the numerous times that he had physically assaulted Susan, they still wanted to make sure that BJ could come home and know that he was still loved. So these were really amazing,
Top
just
notch
compassionate
parents.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Susan, Derek, and Devin really wanted to try and make things work for Bill's sake because they knew how much he loved his son
Yeah.
and wanted to help him. So they were all making an effort to try and make whatever dynamic work. Fast forward a couple years to 2006 when BJ was 20 years old and again legally an adult. Bill took the steps to become BJ's legal guardian. And Bill did this because he wanted to make sure that his son was getting the help that he needed. The goal of becoming his guardian was basically to get BJ to take the medication that he was prescribed for his mental illness.
Wait, I'm confused. Because he's already his dad, doesn't that legally make him his guardian?
But he's an adult at this point. So he's 20 years old.
Got it. Okay.
So he's like, if I'm his court appointed guardian, I can be like, take your fucking meds, dude. So when BJ was taking his meds as prescribed, he was completely normal. He was emotionally steady and not violent at all. With a lot of adults who don't have someone monitoring their meds and making sure they're taken properly, they'll take the medication, start feeling better, and then stop taking them because they are feeling better. Problem solved, right? So it's
Yep. I don't
like
need him anymore.
I'm better, I'm good. But going off those meds can cause someone's behavior to become even worse than it had been prior to, starting them because your body's like swinging
Mm-hmm.
back and forth. It doesn't know how to respond. And so going on and off the meds can just absolutely wreak havoc on someone's body and cause their behavior to be even more unpredictable. And unfortunately, you can't make adults take medicine. It's not
Mm-mm.
like when we were kids and we were forced to take Flintstone vitamins. Like it's
Or
just
that goddamn Robitussin cough medicine that tasted like just
right.
fucking shit. And your mom was like, take it, drink it all.
Remember the orange like baby aspirin?
Yes,
Like
I
the
do.
chewable. I can
And
still
it was
just
like
taste that shit.
chalk.
It was like you ate like a spoonful of Tang. So, as his guardian, Bill was able to get BJ to take his medication at times, but there were still cycles of him going off of them, becoming violent again, going back on them and being
Mm.
fine, stopping them again, and his violent behavior just escalating. So, the family was dealing with this behavioral roller coaster for years. So, in the summer of 2010, things got really bad in the Liske household. Susan's son Derek got into some trouble and he
Uh-oh.
was charged with drunk and disorderly conduct. I couldn't
Ooh.
really find any more details than that, but he obviously did something fucking stupid while on the sauce. And when this run in with the law happened, BJ got super pissed off because Bill and Susan didn't make him leave the house like they did when he had gotten in trouble. I mean, Derek wasn't punching his mom in the chest or like knocking her in the head with drinkware. So they weren't really comparable situations. But nonetheless, BJ was upset and it caused a lot of tension within the family. So prior to this, BJ's anger had really primarily been directed at Susan. But now, for the first time, he was angry with his dad too.
Mm, not good.
Nope. So now we are going to Saturday, October 30th of 2010. So on this day, BJ and his father Bill had taken a trip to their cabin to do some deer hunting. So they had this cabin which was like I think it was like 170 miles or so from their house. And Bill really liked taking these hunting trips so he could get some quality one-on-one time with his son.
Yeah.
Cuz it was like kind of their just little escape and
Yeah.
they
It's like a
both
bonding excursion.
yeah, and so they both loved it. And they had a successful hunting trip. So they killed a deer or two or whatever, I don't know, and wanted to celebrate. So when they got back to their house, they decided that they were going to have a little party in the barn with their neighbor
Okay.
Mark.
All right.
Basically, just dudes hanging out in a barn, drinking beers, celebrating dead deer. I don't fucking know. But Because BJ had been drinking, he ended up staying that night at the Liske house instead of going back to the group home where he was living.
Because he couldn't
And
drive.
yeah, and I don't think he drove anyway. I think Bill would take him back and forth. So I
But
don't
Bill
know
had
that he
been drinking
had,
too.
yeah, and so I don't think he had his own vehicle, which made an impact too. So he ended up just crashing on the couch, and that night everything seemed to be completely just fine and normal. Everybody seemed happy.
This
However,
isn't, yeah, this isn't going to go well.
yeah.
Do it. Well, you
So,
started the whole case off with the Liske family murder, so.
yeah. The next morning around 6:30, so this was Halloween day, a neighbor of the Liskys heard some loud bangs, which they thought sounded like gunshots, but that didn't make a ton of sense. So they just assumed it was something else, a car backfiring or whatever, and just cruised on with their Sunday morning. And I mean, they lived out in the country, so hearing gunshots on occasion
Not
probably
unusual.
wasn't super out of the norm, but whatever. So at 10 o'clock that morning, Devin, who was now 16 years old, came back to the Liske house. He'd been staying that weekend at his dad's, so
Ah,
he wasn't
okay.
in the house the night before. So he had missed out on the sweet ass barn party. He had stopped by the house to get a change of clothes because he was performing with his church choir that morning.
Aw, cute.
When he got to the house, BJ was actually outside loading some stuff into Bill's truck, which was a white Ford F 150. The two didn't get along super well, and they just really kind of avoided each other most of the time. So Devin was actually surprised when BJ seemed really happy and was pretty chatty with him
Uh-oh.
and curious about what he was doing that day. So BJ was asking him, like, hey, why aren't you still at your dad's house? Where are you going? How long are you going
Mm,
to be gone? It was just like kind of asking all these questions about like what his plans for the day were. But Devin was in a hurry to get to church, so he ran to the house, changed into his church clothes, and left the house without seeing anyone else, in the family while he was there, and didn't really think much of BJ's friendly demeanor and just got his stuff left and was off to church. So he goes to church. He sang like a beautiful angel with the choir and then ended up going back to the Liske house around 11 o'clock that morning. So once he got there, he went upstairs to his bedroom to play video games, which was pretty typical teenage boy shit.
mm-hmm. And also, you're not expecting that there's anything fucked up going on.
Didn't seem like there needed to be like a big check in or whatever.
Yeah, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, so no harm, no foul. Who knows what they're doing?
So around 1:30 that afternoon, he's playing video games and Devin got a call from his aunt Lori. She was like, "Hey, your brother Derek was supposed to come over to our house this morning. Derek would go over and help her husband do some construction projects. And he didn't show up that morning." So she was getting worried because he hadn't shown up, which wasn't like him. And so she had tried calling Derek and their mother, Susan, all morning, but neither one of them were answering their phones.
Hmm.
So she called Devin and she was like, where's your brother? And I can't get a hold of your mom. Like, what's going on? So Devin was like, well, shit. Because other than quickly chatting with BJ outside that morning, he hadn't seen anyone else in the family. So he gets up and kind of starts wandering around the house. There's nobody in the kitchen, nobody in the living room. So he goes down to Bill and Susan's room, which was on the first floor of the house, peeked in and was surprised to see them still in bed. They were
Mm,
typically up, pretty early in the morning, so it wasn't normal for them to still be sleeping, especially like 1:30 in the
mm-hmm.
afternoon. So the covers were pulled up over their heads, which was also strange. Susan's foot was kind of sticking out from the cover, so Devin tried to shake her foot to wake her up, but she didn't move. So he pulled the covers back and saw just an absolutely horrifying sight. In fact, it was so bad that Devin initially thought that his parents were playing a Halloween trick on him.
Oh,
But once the shock wore off and Bill and Susan weren't responding, reality set in, and it was clear that they had both been shot multiple times in the head.
there was a lot of blood, I bet.
Yeah. Side note, can you imagine what a incredibly fucked up Halloween prank that would have been?
That would have been
Like,
fucked up.
if they just sat up in bed and were like, "Ha! We got you, dickhead. About time. We've been
That would
laying
have
here
been
all
fucking
morning."
that
Like,
kid's heart would have fell out of his butt.
anyway, in a complete panic, he called his Aunt Lori back and, completely hysterical, he was trying to explain what he had discovered. So at 1:57 p.m., Lori ended up calling 911 to report what was going on. She immediately gets in her car and drives straight to the Liske home. Devin was outside. He was just like a fucking wreck. So she walked in, went to the bedroom, saw the same thing that Devin had found, walked out. She was like, "Holy shit. Oh my god," and walks back out. So police quickly arrived at the house, and I mean, just kind of taking a quick walk through, they noticed that nothing really seemed to be out of place. There weren't any obvious signs of a struggle or break-in, no forced entry. So investigators went into the bedroom and believed that 53-year-old Bill had most likely been killed first, and probably from the doorway of the bedroom, because he slept on the side of the bed closest to the door. He had no defensive wounds and had been shot 5 times in the head.
Damn.
So it seemed like was just sleeping. Somebody opened the door and he was shot and killed before he could even stir. 46-year-old Susan, on the other hand, who was next to her husband Bill, her legs were kind of hanging off the side of the bed. I mean, the covers had been pulled up, but her legs were kind of hanging off. It was like she'd been maybe moved or repositioned on the bed. She had been shot 3 times and she had defensive wounds on one of her hands. So she likely heard the shots that killed Bill, woke up, and, tried to kind of shield herself and protect herself, ended up getting shot in the hand as
Mhm.
well. So after an autopsy, it was discovered that Susan had also been raped
Ah, fuck, I knew you were gonna say that.
and that the sexual assault had likely taken place after she had been killed.
Oh my god.
So both had been shot with a 22 caliber rifle, but no shell casings were found at the scene. So the killer probably had a pocket full of shell casings or a fanny pack or whatever their choice of equipment was. While searching the home, police made their way upstairs and discovered a bedroom that the door was locked. So they ended up busting the door open and unfortunately also found the body of 23-year-old Derek Griffin in his
Mm,
bed. Derek hadn't been shot like his parents. He had blunt force injuries to his head and appeared to have been beaten with a hammer or, some sort of similar object.
that's
Like his
brutal.
stepfather, Bill, Derek also had no defensive wounds and was found on his bed in the fetal position. So he was most likely asleep when he was attacked.
Mm,
And like the only silver lining in all of this was that Bill and Derek were hopefully asleep when they were
mhm,
killed and didn't suffer or know who was responsible for their deaths. So police determined that Derek had probably been killed first and was beaten instead of shot so that Bill and Susan weren't woken by the noise.
mhm,
And searching the Liske property, police investigators discovered a muddy footprint near a dock on their pond. So there was a pond, near their house. Since multiple weapons were used to murder the family and they weren't immediately found in the house, they thought maybe the killer had tossed them into the water. So they ended up draining this pond, which was an acre and a half
wow.
pond, looking for evidence, which was quite a task, but found nothing.
Nothing?
Yeah,
Huh.
nothing of note. No weapons. So
Mm,
police were really trying to make sense of the scene and figure out who was responsible for this massacre, first person on their list was Devin, which made sense, that they
Yeah.
needed to question him and either clear him or keep him on their radar. He was the only member of the family who lived in the house who was still alive. He found the victims
Yeah.
and he was in the house for hours with their bodies before anyone was notified. So, from an outside view,
Yeah,
it seemed
totally.
a little sus. I get it. However, it took like no time at all for him to be cleared. He
Yeah.
had credible alibis. He was staying with his dad the previous night and then singing in the church choir that morning. And he definitely wasn't home at the time when the neighbors heard those gunshots in the
Because he
morning.
was at his dad's, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and everyone reacts differently to trauma, but Devin was shaken the fuck up. He was devastated, and police knew he wasn't responsible for the murders.
I mean, finding your parents like that, he probably to this day, I mean, it's only been 14 years, to this day is going through therapy to work his way through that. Hopefully he's working his way through it because that's traumatic. I can't
I
even
mean,
imagine.
he was just guilty of being a teenage boy who likes to play video games in his room, which
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure is just a misdemeanor. So, not a big deal. When police questioned Devin, he told them about BJ, the Beach, being at the house that morning, and that when he returned to the house after church, Bill's truck was no longer there. So they knew they needed to find BJ. And at that point, they weren't sure if he was a victim, a witness, or a suspect. So they went to his mom's house. I'm not sure what his relationship was like with
With
his
his mom?
mom, but anyway, but he wasn't there. I'm assuming they checked with the group home where he lived, but he was just nowhere to be found. And so they were aware of BJ's violent history and run ins with the law. And so he pretty much immediately was their prime suspect. When they learned a little bit more that, that the Liskes owned a hunting cabin, police contacted authorities in Carroll County, Ohio, which is where the cabin was located, and asked them to go and do a search and see if BJ was there, informing them, that he had a history of violent behavior and that he likely was armed and potentially very dangerous. So, just after 5 o'clock that evening, a Carroll County deputy was dispatched out to the Liskey's cabin, and sure as shit, Bill's white pickup truck is parked outside. So, bingo. They're like, yep, he's here. So, when the deputy pulled into the cabin, driveway or whatever, BJ actually just kind of strolled outside of the cabin and met the officer, and he was arrested. He didn't resist or put up any sort of fight. He just let him handcuff him. No incident. And the officer immediately noticed that BJ had some stains on his socks and shoes that appeared to be blood.
Hmm.
And so they searched the cabin, the surrounding property, as well as the truck. And they found blood on the interior and the exterior of the truck. And inside of the truck, they found a 22 caliber rifle.
He didn't even bother to clean up, change his
No,
socks, get rid of
he was just like,
he didn't give a fuck.
you got me. And so meanwhile, they're also still continuing to search the Liskey home, and there was a closet in their living room. There was like a safe that just kind of seemed out of place or like it had been moved or something, and they found a bloody hammer behind the safe. It was later confirmed that the blood found on BJ's shoes and clothing belonged to Bill, Susan, and Derek. The gun found in the truck matched the weapon used to kill Bill and Susan, and the hidden hammer was confirmed to be the weapon that was used to kill Derek.
Like, he didn't, like, okay.
Yeah. And so to add to this fucking tragedy, on November 1st, 2010, so the day after the murders, Bill Liskey's sister, Susie, so his wife was Susan and his sister was
That's
also
cute.
Susan, but I think she went by Susie, was killed in an explosion in the garage in her home.
What?
So, of course,
An explosion?
initially yeah, people were like, did BJ target her too? Or is someone else involved that's like taking out the entire Liske family? But BJ was already in police custody when she died. The explosion was determined to have been caused by a cigarette that hadn't been put out properly and like some sort of issue with a gas line. I couldn't
Oh my
find many
gosh.
details, but it was just an unfortunate accident. So this like avalanche of tragedy for this family is just heartbreaking, and I'm totally speculating here, but it seems like maybe she was heartbroken and distraught over the murder of her brother, sister in law, and nephew, and went out to the garage to smoke a cigarette and ended up getting blown up and killed.
Oh my God.
It just was like unrelated, but just like added to the trauma and just
Yeah.
tragedy for this family.
How do you process through something like that
Yeah. So that's four family members at this point that are
within
dead.
24 hours? Yeah.
Yeah.
Were their parents still alive? Were Susie and Bill's parents
It
still
didn't
alive?
it didn't mention parents
Could
at
you
all, so I'm not sure.
imagine if they were their son
Yeah.
and daughter, their daughter in law, their grandchild? Oh my God.
And they're
Their
yeah.
other grandchild accused of doing this, at
Mhm.
least to the
Yeah,
first,
and
the other
then
three?
they have another traumatized grandchild that found his parents and brother
Mm-hmm.
dead. So on November
Wow.
10th of 2010, so just like a week and a half or so after the
Mm-hmm.
murders, BJ was charged with 6 counts of aggravated murder. I'm not
Sweet.
sure how the counts work. It was 3 murders, but for some reason there were 2 murder charges for each person. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
Uh, the math isn't mathing for me.
I know. I don't understand it.
Huh. Okay.
So he was charged with 6 counts of aggravated murder. Again, don't understand it. During the arraignment, BJ pled not guilty to the charges, and attorney Gary Coley was appointed as BJ's new guardian since he killed his father, who had been his court appointed guardian.
Mm.
And then 2 defense attorneys were also appointed to represent him. His bail was set at $3 million, which
Mm.
was
Mm-hmm.
based
That's
on
fair.
$1 million for each of the murders. At some point while he was being held in prison, BJ confessed to the murders while talking to his mother on the phone. And of course, it's a recorded fucking line.
Right.
And his mom had asked
How
him,
do these
like,
people have they never seen a forensic files?
no,
Like, come on.
apparently not. Apparently not. And so his mom asked, like, BJ, how could you? And he just said, I wasn't in my right mind. Yeah, no shit,
Yeah,
Holmes.
but you were because you knew exactly what you did because you made an attempt to hide. I mean, you drove 170 miles away. You pulled the covers over Bill and Susan's faces. You locked the door to Derek's room.
Yeah, you
Like
picked up the
you knew
shell
what you did.
casings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yes, that's a big one. You picked up the shell casings.
With the bloody clothes, the weapons, and then a recorded fucking confession, prosecutors had a rock solid case against
Yeah.
BJ. However, it then had to be determined if he was competent to stand trial, which we both just kind of highlighted the reasons why he seemed to know exactly what he was doing. But remember, he was
Yep.
found to not be
I knew
competent to stand trial
that was going
for
to come
the
up again.
previous assault against Susan. But in March of 2011, he was found to be competent, and so
Good.
preparations for his trial began. During a pretrial hearing in August of 2011, BJ decided to withdraw his guilty plea
Mm.
and agreed to a plea deal. So he ended up pleading to 3 counts of aggravated murder. So the prosecution dropped 3 of the 6 original counts
The
of,
phantom murder charges.
yeah,
Okay.
and to drop the death penalty.
Mm.
So BJ was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole instead of facing the death penalty. And during his sentencing hearing, BJ chose to read a 2-page letter apologizing for his actions. He was
Oh.
actually very remorseful, but he did blame his mental health and the devil for the murders.
Oh, that must have been hard to sit through, I think.
I mean, when mental health and the devil get involved.
I always struggle with like criminals who take lives. I always struggle with like, well, they really showed remorse and they apologized for their actions and they said they knew that they couldn't forgive and they deserved to be in prison. I always struggle because I'm like, what's the point of saying anything? Because it doesn't matter what you say, you're not going to be able to overcome the fact that you murdered someone or people. Like,
Yeah.
but a 2-page written statement, not even taking accountability and blaming the devil.
I didn't see like an actual transcription of
Sure, sure,
everything that he
sure.
said, but
Yeah,
when the highlight of that 2-page letter is I blame it on the devil and mental illness, it seems like you're not really taking responsibility.
yeah, and yes, he had significant mental health issues, but you just shared a multi-year history of him leaning into that as opposed to trying to get better, get well.
Yeah. So on March 31st of 2015, BJ was found dead in his prison cell
I
from
did
a
not see that coming.
self-inflicted wound. He was 29 years old.
They gave him the opportunity to fashion a shank.
I don't know. It didn't say what he did. A lot of times there are hangings, but this
Yeah.
seemed like he probably cut himself somehow, and but it didn't
Huh.
give any details. And it just makes this case even sadder because I mean this
He's
is
a
now
coward.
five family members that are gone. And I don't condone what BJ did at all, but I have empathetic space for mental health. And while I can hate that he killed 3 people, I also hate that he struggled daily with mental illness. Most of his life, he probably felt very little peace and true joy. And the fact that this could have all been prevented and that 4 people would still be alive just makes it so much goddamn worse. If he could have been treated properly, if he would have just stayed on his meds, there's just so many things that like this wouldn't have happened if things had taken a different course. But I wanted to talk real quick about Devin,
Hmm.
who was the only surviving family
Survivor.
member. So, years after the murders, he decided to have his wedding at the Liske family property.
Which property, the cabin or the house?
No, the actual house, like where the murders took
Oh,
place. He said that it was his childhood home and that he had so many happy memories there and that he didn't want that place to be tainted by the murders and bad memories and the tragic things that happened there, and he wanted to make more happy
yeah.
memories.
He took it back.
He and his wife ended up having a son who they named Derek in honor
Oh,
of his big brother.
that's awesome.
I also just kind of wanted to point out that it's very fortunate that Devin's life was spared that day because BJ could have easily killed him the second he
It was by
got to that
happenstance.
house.
Yeah.
And it's unclear why BJ didn't kill him as well. Like when he arrived at the house that day, maybe because he knew he was leaving immediately and would be gone for enough time that he could get out of Dodge, get away from the scene. Or maybe that if he killed him and then the people at the church that were expecting him were kind of alerted, that maybe something had happened, like it would have brought attention to the scene more quickly
Mm.
than I don't know what the reasoning was, but for some reason he was spared that day.
I wonder if he was spared because BJ got his rage out. He no longer had the need to kill anymore.
Yeah.
The only reason why Derek was collateral damage, in my opinion. The only reason why he killed Derek is
Yeah.
because Derek just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
The only people truly that BJ was targeting were his dad and his stepmom. And once that got done and he was outside, he was happier than a pig in shit. according to Devin, and he didn't have a need to kill Devin. He didn't have any beef with him.
Right. And Derek was the one who had gotten in trouble that kind of sparked this new
Yeah,
rage in
yeah,
BJ that I think maybe Devin was young enough that he was just kind of like, whatever, you're
be
good,
bopping
dude.
around
Like,
and
I'm
not
not
really
mad at
a
you.
yeah. I think Devin survived because BJ no longer had the need to kill. He didn't have his rage was resolved.
Yeah. And when he was asked about BJ in an interview with Oxygen, Devin said that he didn't think that BJ was a monster. He said we were trying to help him, but we may not have had the opportunity to help him the way that he needed to be helped.
That's very emotionally mature.
He was 16 when his family was killed, and I think it's
Yeah.
just really incredible that he has such an empathetic and clear view
Yeah.
on what happened and what the cause actually was, and that he didn't let that tragedy and loss like steer his life in a negative direction, that he chose to
Yeah.
stay positive and kind and compassionate. And
It's inspiring.
yeah, and so this case really just, I feel like we come across it time and time again, that this case highlights just the issues that often arise surrounding mental health. And it's just a factor in so many cases that we cover, the ones we hear about as true crime fans, and we have to talk about it. Mental illness should not be a taboo subject. It can't be, because if we don't talk about it, we're going to hear about so many more cases like this
Mm-hmm.
where shit just kind of gets swept under the rug, and only after something horrible happens, it's like really easy in hindsight to kind of see signs and escalations and see that if it had been handled properly, lives could be saved,
Mm-hmm.
and really people don't have to struggle day to day with their illnesses. I know that families often try to handle situations on their own, and they don't want to press charges or turn loved ones into authorities, even if that might mean that they can actually get the help that they need. And so people will see that their loved one is struggling and know that they're sick and that they are unable to control their behavior, but ignoring that and not actually treating the illness is not a productive solution. And I know that law enforcement isn't always trained to recognize or properly handle situations involving someone with mental health issues. And especially in small towns, there probably aren't a lot of resources for people struggling with mental health. I grew up in a very small town. I can't think of anywhere someone could go. And a lot of facilities that do treat mental illness are at capacity. So there can be long waits before space opens up. It's kind of like rehab facilities
Mm-hmm.
for drugs, that often the people who need them the most have to wait just simply because resources are so limited. I remember one time I was having stomach pains, and so I went to urgent care. They sent me to the hospital to get a CT scan. They sent me through like the ER to go. And so I was just kind of standing in the AER waiting for the CT to call me. And this family came in, and it was like a mom and dad and a boy that was probably 13. And the kid was just sobbing. And they were like, we just went to the behavioral health clinic, the like psychiatric hospital, and they're at capacity. And they're like, he needs someone. This kid was just like having a meltdown. He was so devastated. You could just see it on him, and it broke my heart. And I was like, where's he supposed to go?
Mm.
The mental hospital is full. Like, his parents are doing what they're supposed to. They're trying to get him help, and you could just see how heartbroken they were. And this kid was just
Inconsolable.
just panicking because he was so depressed, and I don't know if he was suicidal or what was going on, but it was just like I just stood there and I'm watching this family like, where are they going to take him? Like, now what? What's the ER going to do? And it
Mm.
was just like so obvious to me in that moment that like resources are just so limited. And I think about that kid a lot and wonder,
How's
I
he
hope he's
doing?
alive. I hope
Yeah.
he's doing well. I hope he got the help that he needed. But I just like witnessed what's wrong with our
Mm-hmm.
healthcare system.
You highlight a good point because I don't think anyone can throw a stone and not hit someone who is struggling with mental illness, someone who's related to somebody that's struggling with mental illness, have it running in the family. I'm a believer that almost everybody struggles at some point in their life with some kind of mental illness situation
Oh,
because it
absolutely.
can be situational, it can be biochemical in the brain. And for those people, those very few people on this planet that actually haven't had to deal with any kind of a mental illness stigma like anxiety or depression or bipolar or schizophrenia or borderline personality disorder or what psychosis or whatever it is, the brain is really complicated, so it makes sense. It makes sense that many of us struggle with mental illness always, sometimes, or situationally. And
Yeah.
so we need better resources. We need better infrastructure. We need more licensed, experienced professionals that know how to deal with it, especially with children. And we got to keep our kids safe. They're the future of this country.
Yeah.
We have to keep our kids safe and we have to get them the help they need when they need it.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, like, if you see someone whose behavior seems like it's changing, if it's escalating, if they're becoming more violent, whatever, like, don't be afraid to get people help. Putting a band-aid on things, pretending things aren't happening is not doing anyone any favors. And situations like what happened with the Liske family could be prevented
Yeah.
if he
Yeah.
just would have gotten the right help that he needed. And
There's also the challenge of BJ didn't want help. He didn't want to take his medication. He
right.
didn't he didn't want to get healthy and better. And so that's a tug of war. That's a challenging situation.
It's a big time challenge. Yeah.
It's a wonder any of us survive past fucking
I
teenager
know,
years
right?
because our brains aren't fully developed. We're going through puberty. It's the most chaotic time in our lives with hormones and I just and that's when a lot of times mental illness, if there's any underlying mental illness, it starts to pop.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that is the case of the Liske family.
I'm really glad that Devin is doing well.
Yeah, me too. But thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing the podcast. Please continue to share it with other true crime fans or anyone. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Oh, if you have any case suggestions, questions, comments, anything at all, please send us an email to crimewilltellpod@gmail.com. And we appreciate you.
We do.
With that, goodbye, Carrie.
Goodbye, James.
Oh my God, there's a tickle.
In your pickle.
What the fuck?
Tito Petito. Who the fuck are you?
My moms are the worst.
She's kind of a bitch.
They love it. People love it.
Are you taint inclusive or not? I don't know.
Oh my God, how cool would that be?